I woke up on my birthday morning expecting a celebration, but instead, I found myself completely bald. Every single strand of hair was gone. My scalp was as smooth as glass, and I couldn't understand what had happened. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. My hands trembled as I touched my head, hoping it was just a nightmare. But it wasn't. Someone had done this to me while I slept. My daughter-in-law stood in the doorway with a smile I'll never forget. "Now you finally have the look you deserve," she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. The humiliation burned through my entire body. This was supposed to be my special day, the day my family would celebrate me. Instead, I became the target of the cruelest joke imaginable. But what my daughter-in-law didn't know was that this birthday would be remembered for a very different reason. Sometimes the people who humiliate you have no idea who they're really dealing with. And sometimes the truth comes out in the most unexpected ways. I never imagined my 65th birthday would begin with me standing in front of the bathroom mirror, completely bald, tears streaming down my face as I tried to process what had just happened to me. My hands shook as I touched my smooth scalp, searching desperately for even a single strand of hair that might have survived whatever had been done to me during the night. There was nothing. Absolutely nothing. Just bare skin where my silver hair had been, the hair I'd grown out for 3 years after my late husband told me it made me look distinguished and elegant. The worst part wasn't even the hair loss itself. It was hearing my daughter-in-law's voice coming from the hallway, barely containing her laughter as she spoke to someone on the phone. "You should see her now. I told you I'd take care of it. Now she finally has the look she deserves. Maybe she stopped acting like she's better than everyone else." My chest tightened with a pain that had nothing to do with my missing hair, and everything to do with the realization that someone I'd welcomed into my family, someone I'd treated like my own daughter, had deliberately humiliated me on what should have been a day of celebration. I gripped the edge of the bathroom sink until my knuckles turned white, forcing myself to breathe slowly and think clearly, despite the rage and heartbreak coursing through my body. Let me explain how I ended up in this situation, standing in my own bathroom, feeling more vulnerable and exposed than I'd felt in my entire life. 3 years ago, my son Daniel married Rebecca. I'll admit I had reservations from the beginning. Not because she wasn't pretty or successful, but because something in the way she looked at me always felt calculating, as if she was constantly measuring my worth and finding me lacking. But Daniel loved her, and I wanted my son to be happy, so I pushed my concerns aside and welcomed her with open arms. I helped plan their wedding, contributed financially despite my modest retirement income, and did everything possible to make her feel like part of our family. My late husband Thomas had passed away 5 years before Daniel's wedding. We'd been married for 42 years, and his death left a hole in my life that nothing could fill. Thomas had been a contractor, a man who worked with his hands and built a good life for us through decades of hard work and careful planning. He wasn't rich, but he was smart with money and always thought about our future. The house we lived in, the one where I still lived, was paid off completely. It was a beautiful old Victorian home in a neighborhood that had become quite desirable over the years, though I rarely thought about its value. It was just home to me, filled with memories of raising Daniel and growing old with Thomas. After Thomas died, Daniel suggested several times that I should sell the house and move into something smaller, maybe an apartment or a condo that would be easier to maintain. "Mom, this place is too big for you," he'd say, with what seemed like genuine concern. "You shouldn't be dealing with all this upkeep by yourself. Would you do the same in my place? Would you give up the home where you raised your children and built your life just because it seemed more practical?" I always politely declined. Yes, the house was large, but I loved every room, every creaky floorboard, every window that Thomas had personally restored. I had my garden where I grew vegetables and flowers. I had my reading nook in the sunroom where I spent peaceful afternoons with my books. I had the workshop in the garage where Thomas had taught Daniel how to use tools, and where I sometimes went just to feel close to my husband's memory. This house was part of my identity, and I wasn't ready to let it go just because I lived alone now. Rebecca's attitude toward me changed noticeably about 6 months after the wedding. At first, she'd been polite enough, if somewhat distant. But then came the small comments, the barely concealed eye rolls, the suggestions that seemed helpful on the surface but carried an undercurrent of criticism. You know, there are some great retirement communities where you could make friends your own age, she'd say during family dinners. It must be so lonely rattling around in that big house all by yourself. Have you thought about updating your wardrobe? I could take you shopping. You'd be surprised how much younger you could look with some modern pieces. Maybe it's time to consider assisted living. I mean, you're getting up there in age. And what if something happens to you when nobody's around? Each comment felt like a small cut, not deep enough to call out directly, but painful nonetheless. I tried to laugh them off, to give her the benefit of the doubt and assume she meant well. But deep down, I felt my dignity being chipped away piece by piece. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Give it a thumbs up and comment what you would do in this situation. Daniel seemed oblivious to his wife's subtle attacks on my self-esteem. Whenever I tried to mention something Rebecca had said that hurt my feelings, he'd defend her immediately. "Mom, she's just trying to help. She cares about you. You're being too sensitive." Those words, "you're being too sensitive," became a knife that twisted in my heart every time I heard them. I started to doubt myself, wondering if I was imagining the hostility in Rebecca's voice. If I was indeed being an overly sensitive old woman who couldn't accept helpful advice. The situation escalated about a year into their marriage when Rebecca got pregnant. I was thrilled at the prospect of becoming a grandmother, and I immediately offered to help in any way I could. I knitted baby blankets, bought thoughtful gifts, and started researching the best practices for grandparents. In modern families, because I wanted to be supportive without being overbearing. But Rebecca's response to my enthusiasm was ice cold. "We'll let you know when we need help," she said sharply, when I offered to attend a doctor's appointment with them. "This is our baby, our experience, and we don't need you inserting yourself into every aspect of it." I felt the floor opening beneath my feet when she said those words. My son stood right there and said nothing in my defense. He just looked uncomfortable and changed the subject, leaving me to swallow my hurt and pretend everything was fine. After my grandson was born, a beautiful boy they named Oliver, the distance between us grew even wider. Rebecca barely let me see him. Every time I asked to visit or offered to babysit, she had an excuse ready. "He's napping. He's not feeling well. We have plans. We're establishing a routine and don't want to disrupt it." I watched through social media as Rebecca's parents, who lived across the country, came to visit for weeks at a time. I saw photos of them holding Oliver, feeding him, playing with him. They were given all the grandmother and grandfather privileges that I was denied, despite living just 20 minutes away. The injustice of it burned in my chest, but whenever I tried to talk to Daniel about it, he'd say I was being dramatic. That Rebecca was just protective as a new mother, that I needed to give them space. Leave me in the comments. Have you been through something similar? My 65th birthday was approaching, and Daniel called to say they wanted to host a dinner at my house to celebrate. I was surprised but delighted. Maybe this was a turning point, I thought. Maybe Rebecca was finally ready to include me properly in their family life. "We'll come over the night before and stay through your birthday," Daniel said. "Rebecca wants to cook for you, and we'll bring Oliver so you can spend time with him. It'll be a real family celebration." My heart soared with hope. Perhaps I'd been wrong about Rebecca. Perhaps she was trying to make amends for the distance that had grown between us. I spent days cleaning the house until it sparkled, preparing the guest rooms with fresh linens, and buying special groceries for meals we could share together. I even bought new toys for Oliver, age-appropriate educational items that I'd carefully researched. They arrived on the evening before my birthday. Rebecca seemed pleasant enough, complimenting the house and accepting the glass of wine I offered her. We had dinner together, a somewhat awkward but not unpleasant meal where Daniel talked about his work and I got to hold Oliver for a precious 20 minutes before Rebecca said he needed to go to bed. "Why don't you head to bed early too?" Rebecca suggested as she came back downstairs after putting Oliver to sleep. You look tired, and we want you well rested for your big day tomorrow. I did feel tired. I'd been running around all day preparing for their visit, and the emotional relief of having them in my home had left me exhausted. I agreed, hugged my son goodnight, and went upstairs to my bedroom. That's when everything went terribly wrong, though I wouldn't know it until morning. I woke up slowly, my head feeling foggy and heavy in a way that seemed unusual. The sunlight was streaming through my bedroom window, and I could hear voices downstairs. For a moment, I just lay there, happy that my family was in the house, that I wouldn't be spending my birthday alone. Then I shifted my head on the pillow and felt something strange. My pillow was covered in hair, silver strands everywhere, so much hair that it looked like someone had placed a wig on my pillowcase. My hands flew to my head, and my heart stopped when I felt smooth skin instead of the shoulder-length hair I'd had when I went to bed. I stumbled out of bed and into the bathroom, my legs barely holding me up. The woman in the mirror was unrecognizable, completely bald, not a single hair remaining. My scalp was pale and exposed, and I looked like a stranger to myself. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I held them back, trying to understand what had happened. Do you think I overreacted? Tell me in the comments. That's when I heard Rebecca's voice in the hallway, and the pieces started falling into place with sickening clarity. You should see her now? I told you I'd take care of it. Now she finally has the look she deserves. Maybe she'll stop acting like she's better than everyone else. She paused, listening to whoever was on the phone. Of course I did. I put enough in her wine to make sure she wouldn't wake up. Then it was easy. Daniel was passed out too, so he didn't hear a thing. Just took some clippers and shaved it all off. She'll be so humiliated she'll probably want to hide in this house forever. My hands trembled with contained rage as I listened to her laughing, actually laughing about what she'd done to me. She'd drugged me on my birthday, violated my body while I was unconscious, and robbed me of something that had taken years to grow and held deep sentimental value. The cruelty of it was almost incomprehensible. I wanted to storm out there and confront her immediately, but something held me back. A cold fury settled over me, the kind that demands calculation rather than immediate reaction. Through my shock and humiliation, a part of my brain that was still thinking clearly told me to wait, to listen, to understand the full scope of what was happening before I acted. Rebecca was still talking on the phone, her voice carrying clearly through the old house's thin walls. This is just the beginning. Once we get her to sell this house, we'll be set. Do you know how much this property is worth? At least $800,000, probably more. Daniel's name isn't on the deed, but she'll leave it to him eventually, and in the meantime, we'll convince her to sell and move somewhere cheaper. She's so pathetic and desperate for our approval, she'll do whatever we want. A lump tightened in my throat, but not from sadness anymore, from pure, crystallized understanding. This wasn't just about humiliating me. This was about isolating me, breaking down my self-esteem, and manipulating me into giving up my home and my assets. Every cruel comment, every restriction on seeing my grandson, every attempt to make me feel worthless had been part of a calculated plan. The hair thing was genius, if I do say so myself, Rebecca continued. Now she'll be too embarrassed to go out, too ashamed to see her friends or show up at any family events. She'd be completely dependent on us for social interaction, and we can control exactly how much or how little of that she gets. Daniel's already conditioned to take my side over hers, so she's got nobody. It's perfect. I could barely breathe through my humiliation and rage. This woman had infiltrated my family, turned my son against me, weaponized my grandchild, and now physically assaulted me, all in pursuit of my property and my money. And she'd done it with such calculation, such deliberate cruelty, that I could barely process it. Give it a thumbs up if you think I did the right thing. But here's what Rebecca didn't know, what nobody except my lawyer knew, because I'd always been a private person about my financial affairs. Thomas hadn't just been a contractor, he'd been a very successful contractor who'd invested wisely over the decades. The house Rebecca was so eager to get her hands on wasn't my only asset. It wasn't even my most valuable asset. My late husband had purchased rental properties, invested in commercial real estate, and built a portfolio that was now worth several $1 million. The modest lifestyle I lived was a choice, not a necessity. Thomas and I had always believed in living below our means, in not flashing our wealth, in being prudent and careful. After Thomas died, I'd continued managing the properties with the help of a property management company. The income from rentals alone was more than enough to live comfortably, but I'd never felt the need to change my lifestyle or advertise my financial situation. Daniel knew his father had been successful, but I'd never discussed the specific details of my inheritance or the full extent of the estate. It had seemed unnecessary, and frankly, I'd wanted to see if Daniel would love and respect me for who I was, not for what I could give him. Now I was grateful for that decision. If Rebecca had known the truth about my wealth, her manipulation might have been even more aggressive, more dangerous. I stood in that bathroom, bald and shaking, and made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Rebecca immediately. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me broken and helpless. Instead, I was going to get dressed, put on a scarf to cover my head, and act as if everything was normal. I was going to let this play out a little further and gather more evidence of exactly who my daughter-in-law really was. The makeup I applied couldn't hide the puffiness around my eyes, but the silk scarf I wrapped around my head was elegant enough that it looked like a deliberate fashion choice rather than a desperate attempt to cover my humiliation. I took several deep breaths, straightened my shoulders, and walked downstairs. Rebecca was in the kitchen, making breakfast as if nothing had happened. She looked up when I entered, and I saw the flash of satisfaction in her eyes when she saw the scarf on my head. "Good morning. Happy birthday," she said with fake cheerfulness. "I was just making pancakes for your special day. Did you sleep well? Comment below what you would have done differently." My blood boiled with indignation, but I kept my voice steady. I slept very deeply. Actually, almost too deeply. I had the strangest feeling when I woke up, like I'd been drugged or something. I watched her face carefully. There was a microscopic flinch, so brief that most people would have missed it. But I saw it, and it confirmed everything I'd overheard. "Oh, that's just age," she said dismissively. "Sometimes older people have trouble gauging their sleep properly. Maybe you're coming down with something. You do look a bit pale." "Where's Daniel?" I asked, ignoring her jab about my age. "He went out to get fresh orange juice for breakfast. He should be back soon." Perfect. I had a few minutes alone with her. "Rebecca, can I ask you something honestly?" I said, sitting down at the kitchen table and folding my hands in front of me. She turned from the stove, spatula in hand, her expression guarded. "Of course. Why do you hate me so much?" The question clearly caught her off guard. Her mouth opened slightly, and for a second, I saw genuine surprise on her face. Then the mask came back down. "I don't hate you. What would make you think that? The fact that you drugged me last night and shaved my head while I was unconscious might be a clue," I said calmly. The spatula clattered to the floor. Rebecca's face went pale, then flushed red. "I don't know what you're talking about. That's an insane accusation." "Is it? Because I woke up this morning completely bald, and I heard you on the phone bragging about it. I heard you laughing about how you'd make sure I was too humiliated to leave the house. I heard you talking about your plan to get me to sell my home so you and Daniel could profit from it. Would you act the same in my situation? Let me know in the comments." Rebecca's expression shifted from shock to calculation to something that looked almost like relief, as if she'd decided there was no point in pretending anymore. "So what if you heard me? What are you going to do about it?" "Tell Daniel. He'll never believe you over me. I'm his wife, the mother of his child. You're just a lonely old woman who's jealous of our relationship. Everyone will think you've gone senile, that you're making up crazy stories for attention." The casual cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. "Why?" I asked again. "What did I ever do to you to deserve this kind of treatment?" She laughed, actually laughed, and leaned against the kitchen counter with her arms crossed. "You didn't have to do anything. You existed. You had this house, this life, these resources, and you were wasting them. Daniel should have inherited everything when his father died, but instead, you're squatting in this valuable property, living like some modest, middle-class retiree when you're sitting on a gold mine. It's pathetic. So this is about money. Everything is about money. Daniel and I have expenses. We have a child to raise, a lifestyle to maintain. His salary is good, but not great, and my career has been on hold since Oliver was born. We need capital, and you have it, but you're too selfish to help your own son. My face was burning with shame and anger. I would have helped Daniel if he'd asked. I would have done anything for my son. But we don't want help, Rebecca said, her voice dripping with condescension. We want what's rightfully his. And if you're too stubborn to hand it over willingly, then we'll just have to make your life miserable enough that you'll do anything we ask. Starting with making you so ashamed and isolated that you'll think selling this house and moving into some depressing facility is your own idea. How would you act in this situation? Share your thoughts. I stared at this woman, this person I'd welcomed into my family and tried to love, and felt something inside me harden into steel. I see. Well, Rebecca, I appreciate your honesty. I truly do. It's clarifying. She smirked, clearly thinking she'd won, that she'd successfully intimidated me into submission. Good. I'm glad we understand each other. Now, are you going to come have birthday pancakes and pretend everything is normal? Or are you going to make a scene? Actually, I think I'll make a call first, I said, pulling my phone from my pocket. Who are you calling? Daniel. Go ahead. He won't believe anything you say. Not Daniel, I said calmly, dialing a number I knew by heart. My lawyer. Rebecca's smirk faltered slightly. Your lawyer? On your birthday? That's dramatic even for you. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Good morning, Mrs. Patterson. Happy birthday. Thank you, Robert. I'm sorry to call you on a Saturday morning, but I need you to do something for me right away. Of course. What do you need? I looked directly at Rebecca as I spoke. I need you to draw up papers removing my son Daniel from my will entirely, and I need a restraining order prepared against my daughter-in-law, Rebecca Patterson, for assault and battery. She drugged me and shaved my head without my consent last night. Rebecca's face went from smug to shocked to terrified in the span of seconds. You can't do that. You're bluffing. Robert's voice on the phone was all business. I can have both documents ready by Monday morning. Do you want to come to the office, or shall I come to you? I'll come to you. And Robert, I also want to start the process of setting up a trust for my grandson Oliver that neither of his parents can access until he turns 25. Can you arrange that? Absolutely. I'll start the paperwork immediately. Subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stories like this. Thank you, Robert. I'll see you Monday at 10. I ended the call and set my phone on the table. Rebecca was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Genuine fear, mixed with disbelief. You can't cut Daniel out of your will. He's your son. He's my son who stood by and let you abuse me, who chose you over his own mother repeatedly, who showed me no loyalty or respect. Yes, I can absolutely cut him out of my will. In fact, I should have done it months ago. You're not rich. You're just a retired contractor's widow living in an old house. What will he even be missing? This was the moment. This was when I would show her exactly how wrong she'd been about everything. Rebecca, let me tell you what Daniel will be missing. He'll be missing the $800,000 house you're so eager to get your hands on. He'll be missing the 4 rental properties across the city worth a combined $2 million. He'll be missing the commercial building downtown that generates $50,000 a year in rental income. He'll be missing the investment portfolio worth approximately $3.5 million. He'll be missing the life insurance payout from his father that I never touched, which has been sitting in an account growing interest for 5 years and is now worth $800,000. Should I continue? Rebecca's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. No sound came out. My late husband was a very successful man who believed in living modestly and investing wisely. I continued his philosophy after he died. The comfortable but unremarkable lifestyle you've seen me living is a choice, not a financial necessity. I could have been driving a luxury car and wearing designer clothes, but that's never been who I am. I preferred to live simply, to stay in the house I loved, to maintain the values that Thomas and I shared. You're lying, Rebecca whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. I'm not. And you just gambled away your husband's inheritance because you couldn't control your cruelty and greed. Everything I have will now go to charity and to a trust for Oliver that you'll never be able to touch. Congratulations. The sound of a car door closing outside made us both turn. Daniel was back with the orange juice. Was I wrong to feel this way? Tell me what you think. Here's what's going to happen, I said quickly, my voice low and firm. You're going to tell Daniel what you did to me. Every detail. The drugging, the assault, the phone conversation, all of it. And if you don't, I will. But if it comes from me, I'll also be pressing criminal charges against you immediately. If it comes from you, voluntarily, I might consider not involving the police. You have 30 seconds to decide. Daniel walked through the front door, calling out cheerfully, I got the good orange juice, not the cheap stuff. Only the best for Mom's birthday. He walked into the kitchen and stopped when he saw our faces. What's going on? Why do you both look so serious? Rebecca opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Tears started streaming down her face. Real tears this time. Tears of panic and desperation rather than manipulation. I did something terrible, she whispered. And then it all came out. Under Daniel's increasingly horrified gaze, Rebecca confessed everything. The drugging, the assault, the plan to isolate me and force me to sell the house, the calculated cruelty of every interaction we'd had. She tried to minimize it at first, tried to frame it as a joke that went too far, but I corrected her every time she lied or downplayed her actions. My son's face went through so many emotions I couldn't track them all. Shock, disbelief, anger, horror, shame. When Rebecca finished her confession, the silence in the kitchen was deafening. Mom, Daniel finally said, his voice breaking. Mom, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to apologize for this. You can't, I said simply. There's no apology adequate for what's been done. Your wife assaulted me in my own home on my birthday. She drugged me, physically violated me, and planned to systematically destroy my mental health and independence for financial gain. And you, Daniel, created the environment where she felt comfortable doing this by consistently taking her side, dismissing my feelings, and treating me like an inconvenient obligation rather than your mother. I never knew she felt this way about you. I never knew she was planning any of this. Didn't you? Or did you just not want to know? How many times did I try to tell you that something was wrong? How many times did you call me sensitive or dramatic instead of actually listening to me? Leave me in the comments. Have you been through something similar? He had no answer for that because we both knew the truth. He'd chosen the easy path, the path that kept his wife happy and his life comfortable, rather than standing up for what was right. I want both of you out of my house, I said, my voice steady despite the tears that were finally falling. Right now, take Oliver and leave. Mom, please, let me make this right somehow. You can't make this right, Daniel. Not today, maybe not ever. I've called my lawyer, and I'm removing you from my will. Everything I have will go to charity and to a trust for Oliver that neither of you can touch. You've shown me who you are, and more importantly, you've shown me who you choose to be when it matters most. Rebecca was sobbing now, ugly, desperate sobs. Please, I'm sorry. I'll do anything. I'll get help. I'll apologize publicly. Please don't do this. You're not sorry for what you did, I said coldly. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry there are consequences. Those are very different things. Daniel tried one more time. Mom, I love you. You're my mother. We can work through this. My heart ached, but I didn't let it show. If you loved me, you would have protected me. If you loved me, you would have listened when I tried to tell you something was wrong. If you loved me, you never would have let it get to this point. Now, please leave before I change my mind about not pressing charges. They left. Rebecca was still crying. Daniel was pale and shaking, and baby Oliver was confused about why everyone was upset. I watched them pack their things and walk out my front door, and I didn't try to stop them. When the house was quiet again, I finally allowed myself to break down. I sat on my kitchen floor, still wearing the scarf that covered my bald head, and cried for the family I'd lost, the son who'd failed me, and the grandmother relationship I'd never get to have with Oliver. The grief was overwhelming, but underneath it was something else. Relief. The truth was finally out. The pretending was over. The manipulation had ended. Over the next few weeks, things unfolded in ways I hadn't entirely expected. Robert, my lawyer, helped me execute all the changes to my will and set up the trust for Oliver exactly as I'd specified. Daniel called repeatedly, leaving voicemails that progressed from defensive to apologetic to desperate. I didn't answer. I needed space and time to figure out if there was any path forward for our relationship. Rebecca, I later learned, had been forced to confess everything to her own family when Daniel told them what had happened. Her parents were apparently horrified and ashamed. They reached out to me with a sincere apology for their daughter's actions, though, of course, they weren't responsible for her choices. The police investigation moved forward despite my initial reluctance. The drugging alone was a serious crime, and when Robert insisted I needed to protect myself legally, I agreed to cooperate fully. Rebecca was charged with assault and battery, as well as administering drugs without consent. She ultimately pleaded guilty to reduced charges and received probation, mandatory counseling, and a restraining order that kept her away from me. Do you think I overreacted? Comment below. Daniel eventually filed for divorce. He came to see me 3 months after my birthday, looking like he'd aged 10 years. We sat in my living room, the same room where we'd celebrated so many Christmases and birthdays and ordinary family moments, and we tried to talk. I failed you, he said simply. There's no excuse for it. I was so focused on keeping the peace in my marriage that I sacrificed my relationship with you. I was blind to what Rebecca really was, and even when you tried to show me, I didn't want to see it. I'm ashamed of the son I've been. It was the first time he'd taken full responsibility without making excuses or trying to minimize what had happened. I appreciated that, even though it didn't erase the pain. I don't know if I can forgive you right now, I told him honestly. Maybe someday, but not yet. You didn't just fail to protect me. You actively participated in my mistreatment by dismissing my feelings and enabling her behavior. I know, and I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I understand what I did wrong, and I'm getting help, therapy, to figure out why I was so willing to abandon my mother to please my wife. We talked for 2 hours that day. It wasn't a reconciliation, but it was a start. A tentative, painful start toward potentially rebuilding something from the ruins of our relationship. As for my hair, it grew back slowly. For the first few months, I wore scarves and hats, and eventually, I embraced the short style that emerged. Funny enough, I received more compliments on my short silver hair than I ever had on my longer style. Friends told me I looked modern, edgy, even younger. The thing that was meant to humiliate me became a symbol of survival and transformation. I also started attending a support group for people who'd experienced family estrangement and elder abuse. Hearing other people's stories helped me process my own experience and realize I wasn't alone in what I'd been through. The emotional manipulation, the financial exploitation, the physical violation, these were patterns that affected many older adults, often at the hands of their own family members. Through the support group, I met other women who'd been through similar experiences, and I formed genuine friendships based on mutual understanding and respect. My social life actually improved after Daniel and Rebecca left my life. I wasn't isolated and dependent like Rebecca had planned. Instead, I was connected to a community of strong, resilient people who understood exactly what I'd survived. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Give it a thumbs up and comment what you would do in this situation. About 6 months after my birthday, Daniel brought Oliver to see me for the first time since everything happened. It was supervised, just the three of us, no Rebecca. Oliver was walking now, babbling in that adorable way toddlers do, and seeing him filled me with joy and sadness in equal measure. "I want you to have a relationship with your grandson," Daniel said. "If you're willing, if you feel safe, I'd like to bring him to see you regularly. Rebecca has agreed to it as part of the divorce terms." I held Oliver in my arms, and he played with my short hair, giggling when I made funny faces at him. "I'd like that," I said, "but there are conditions. You come alone with him, no Rebecca ever. We start slow, supervised visits until trust is rebuilt. And you continue therapy to address why you failed to protect your mother and why you enabled abuse." Daniel agreed to all of it. The visits became weekly, then twice weekly. I got to be the grandmother I'd always wanted to be, reading to Oliver, playing with him, watching him grow and learn. It wasn't the family dynamic I'd imagined, but it was something real and based on honesty rather than manipulation. Daniel kept his word about therapy, and over time, we slowly rebuilt our relationship. It would never be what it was before. That innocence was gone forever. But we created something new, something more honest and harder one. He worked hard to prove he was trustworthy, and I worked hard to be open to the possibility of forgiveness. As for the money, I kept my word about the will. Daniel was not in it. The bulk of my estate would go to charities focusing on elder abuse prevention and support, with a substantial trust for Oliver that he'd access at 20. But I also set up an education fund for Oliver that would pay for his schooling through college, and I helped Daniel with a down payment for a modest home once his divorce was final. Not because I owed him anything, but because I could see he was genuinely trying to become a better man, and I wanted to support that growth. Rebecca moved across the country after the divorce was finalized. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she remarried quickly, presumably finding another target for her manipulations. I didn't waste energy being angry about it. She was out of my life, and that was enough. Looking back on my 65th birthday, the day I woke up bald and humiliated, I realize it was also the day I woke up to the truth. Yes, I lost my hair temporarily. Yes, I lost the son I thought I had. Yes, I lost the naive belief that family loyalty was unconditional and automatic. But I gained something more valuable: clarity. I learned that dignity isn't about how others treat you, it's about how you respond when they treat you badly. I learned that setting boundaries, even painful ones, is stenta novamente conteran, act of self-respect, not selfishness. I learned that sometimes the people who should love us most are the ones who hurt us deepest, and that recognizing that truth is the first step toward healing. My life now, at 66 years old, is fuller and more authentic than it was before that terrible birthday. I have genuine friendships built on mutual respect. I have a relationship with my grandson that brings me joy. I have a son who is slowly learning what it means to be accountable and trustworthy. And I have myself, my integrity intact, my resources protected, and my future secure. The house that Rebecca wanted so badly is still mine, and it still holds all the memories of my life with Thomas. But now it also holds new memories. Birthday parties for Oliver, where we bake cookies and read stories. Dinners with friends from my support group. Quiet evenings where I sit in my reading nook and feel grateful for the peace I fought so hard to reclaim. Comment if you know someone like this, someone who thought they could manipulate and humiliate you, only to discover you were stronger than they ever imagined. I think about what Rebecca said that morning in my kitchen, about how I was wasting my resources, about how I should have handed everything over to Daniel simply because he was my son, and I realize how fundamentally she misunderstood what wealth really means. Wealth isn't just money or property. Wealth is having the strength to stand up for yourself when everyone expects you to be weak. Wealth is knowing your worth even when others try to diminish it. Wealth is building a life of purpose and integrity rather than chasing status and material gain. By those measures, I was always wealthy, and Rebecca was always poor, no matter how much money she managed to manipulate from others. Thomas used to tell me that character is revealed in crisis. He'd say, when things are easy, everyone looks good, but when things get hard, you see who people really are. He was right. My birthday crisis revealed Rebecca's true character. Cruel, greedy, calculating. It revealed Daniel's character. Weak, conflict avoidant, easily manipulated. And it revealed my own character. Resilient, principled, and stronger than I'd given myself credit for. There are still hard days. Days when I miss the son I thought I had, the family dynamic I thought I'd built. Days when I look at other grandmothers with their adult children and feel a pang of grief for what I lost. Days when I touch my now short hair and remember the violation of waking up bald and helpless. But those days are becoming fewer and further between. And on the good days, which are most days now, I feel something I didn't feel for years before that birthday. Free. Free from walking on eggshells around Rebecca. Free from wondering why I was never good enough for my daughter-in-law's approval. Free from the exhausting work of trying to maintain a relationship with people who didn't value me. The final legal proceedings wrapped up about a year after my birthday. The restraining order remained in place. Rebecca's criminal record would follow her forever. My will was solidified with ironclad language that protected my wishes. Oliver's trust was established and funded. And I could finally breathe without wondering when the next manipulation or humiliation would come. Give it a thumbs up if you think I did the right thing in protecting myself and my grandson's future. I've started volunteering with an organization that helps older adults recognize and escape financial exploitation by family members. It's surprisingly common, this betrayal by the people who are supposed to love and protect us. Adult children who view their elderly parents as ATM machines rather than human beings. Daughters-in-law and sons-in-law who marry into families with ulterior motives. Grandchildren who are kept as hostages to manipulate grandparents into signing over property or money. Sharing my story has helped others find the courage to set boundaries and protect themselves. When I tell them about waking up bald on my birthday, about hearing my daughter-in-law gloat over what she'd done, they see their own experiences reflected back at them. And when I tell them about the phone call to my lawyer, about removing my son from my will, about choosing my own dignity over family pressure, they begin to believe they can do the same. One woman in her 70s told me, "I thought I was supposed to sacrifice everything for my children, even when they treat me terribly." Hearing your story helped me understand that's not love. It's just enabling abuse. She went on to set boundaries with her own adult children, who had been financially exploiting her for years. Last I heard, she'd moved to a retirement community where she'd made wonderful friends and was living her best life, free from the guilt and manipulation that had controlled her for decades. That's the other gift that came from my terrible birthday, the ability to help others avoid or escape similar situations. My pain had purpose. My humiliation, once I moved through it, became a tool for empowerment rather than a source of shame. Daniel recently told me he's started dating someone new, a woman who seems kind and genuine based on his descriptions. He's being more cautious this time, he says, moving more slowly, paying attention to red flags he ignored with Rebecca. He asked if I'd like to meet her eventually, and I said maybe, when the time is right. I'm not ready to welcome another potential daughter-in-law into my heart, not yet. The wounds from Rebecca are still healing. But I appreciate that he asked rather than assuming. I appreciate that he's respecting my boundaries and my pace. These small considerations matter. They show growth, awareness, the kind of emotional intelligence he lacked when he was married to Rebecca. Oliver is 3 now, a bright and energetic little boy who calls me grandma and runs to hug me when Daniel brings him for visits. He doesn't remember the chaos of his early years, the tension between his parents, the grandmother he barely knew because his mother kept us apart. For him, I'm just grandma, the person who always has cookies and books and time to play. Subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stories like this. I'm building a relationship with him based on love and presence, not guilt or obligation. I tell him stories about his grandfather Thomas, about the man Oliver never got to meet but who would have adored him. I teach him the values Thomas and I shared: honesty, integrity, hard work, kindness. I want Oliver to grow up knowing that family isn't about blood alone. It's about how people treat each other, how they show up when it matters, how they choose loyalty and respect over convenience and greed. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never overheard that phone conversation on my birthday morning. Would I have continued living in denial, making excuses for Rebecca's cruelty, accepting Daniel's dismissal of my concerns? Would I have eventually been manipulated into selling my house and moving into some facility where I'd have been even more isolated and vulnerable? I think I would have. I think Rebecca's plan would have worked if she hadn't gotten so confident, so arrogant in her cruelty that she couldn't resist bragging about it on the phone where I could hear. Her overconfidence was her downfall, and it was my salvation. The irony doesn't escape me. The thing meant to humiliate and control me actually freed me. The assault that was supposed to make me too ashamed to face the world instead gave me the clarity and courage to change my entire life. My hair is now a stylish silver pixie cut that I maintain every 6 weeks at a salon my support group friends recommended. I get compliments from strangers. I feel more confident than I did with my longer hair, more myself somehow. The woman in the mirror now isn't the woman who woke up bald and violated, but she carries that woman's strength, that woman's refusal to be broken by cruelty. I've redecorated parts of the house, too, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The guest room where Daniel and Rebecca stayed that awful night is now a craft room where I work on quilting projects. I couldn't stand to have it remain a guest room after what happened there. Now it's a space of creativity and peace, filled with bright fabrics and afternoon sunlight. The kitchen, where Rebecca confessed her plan and I made that phone call to Robert, has been updated with new counters and fresh paint. I wanted to reclaim it, to fill it with new memories rather than letting that confrontation define the space forever. Now it's where Oliver and I make cookies, where my friends and I share coffee and conversation, where I prepare meals that nourish my body and soul. Leave me in the comments. Have you been through something similar? How did you find the strength to protect yourself? My lawyer Robert has become not just my attorney, but a trusted advisor and friend. He guided me through the legal complexities with patience and wisdom, never judging me for the decisions I made, always supporting my right to protect myself and my assets. When the case was finally closed, he told me, "You handled this with more grace and strength than most people could manage. You should be proud of yourself." Those words meant more to me than he probably realized. For so long, I'd been made to feel like I was the problem, like my feelings were invalid, like my concerns were just the complaints of a difficult old woman. Having someone validate my experience, affirm my choices, and recognize my strength helped me rebuild my sense of self-worth. I've also reconnected with old friends who'd drifted away during the years when Rebecca was systematically isolating me. I hadn't realized how much I'd withdrawn from my social circle, how many invitations I'd declined because Rebecca made me feel guilty for having a life outside of waiting for scraps of time with my family. Now I have lunch dates, book club meetings, volunteer commitments, and a social calendar that keeps me active and engaged. One friend told me recently, "You seem lighter somehow, like a weight has been lifted off your shoulders." She was right. The weight of trying to earn love from people who were never going to give it freely. The weight of walking on eggshells and second-guessing myself constantly. The weight of pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. All of that is gone now. The money that Rebecca was so desperate to get her hands on remains mine to manage and distribute as I see fit. I've increased my charitable giving, supporting causes that matter to me. Elder abuse prevention, women's shelters, youth education programs. Thomas and I always planned to leave a legacy beyond just passing wealth to the next generation, and I'm honoring that vision. I've also treated myself to some things I'd been putting off. A trip to Europe that Thomas and I had always talked about taking. New furniture for the living room. A beautiful piece of art from a local gallery that makes me smile every time I see it. These aren't extravagant purchases, but they're investments in my own happiness, acknowledgments that my comfort and joy matter. Would you do the same in my place? Would you choose yourself over family expectations? The trust for Oliver is structured so that when he turns 25, he'll receive a substantial sum that can help him start his adult life on solid footing. But it comes with one condition. He must complete a financial literacy course and meet with a trust administrators to discuss responsible money management. I don't want him to inherit wealth without understanding the responsibility that comes with it. I want him to appreciate that money is a tool, not a measure of worth, and that how you earn and use it says everything about your character. Daniel knows about the trust, and to his credit, he's never asked me to change it or give him access to it. He seems to understand that this is my way of providing for his son while protecting Oliver from the kind of manipulation his parents engaged in. It's another small sign that Daniel is genuinely working on becoming a better person. There are moments when I wonder if I was too harsh, if I should have been more forgiving, if family should always get second chances regardless of what they've done. But then I remember the feeling of waking up bald, the sound of Rebecca laughing about drugging me, the years of small cruelties that led up to that moment, and I know I made the right choice. Forgiveness doesn't require you to maintain a relationship with people who've harmed you. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the harm never happened or exposing yourself to more abuse. Forgiveness, I've learned, can exist alongside boundaries. I can forgive Daniel for his failures while still protecting myself from being hurt again. I can forgive Rebecca for being who she is while never allowing her back into my life. The support group taught me that. They taught me that self-protection isn't selfish, it's necessary. They taught me that you can love someone and still hold them accountable. They taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's destructive behavior, even if that someone is your own child. My story has a strange kind of happy ending, though not the one I would have chosen if given the option. I didn't get the close, loving family I'd always imagined. I didn't get to be the grandmother who's deeply involved in every aspect of her grandson's daily life. I didn't get the daughter-in-law who became like a daughter to me. But I got something perhaps more valuable. I got truth, clarity, boundaries, and self-respect. I got to discover reserves of strength I didn't know I had. I got to prove to myself that I could survive betrayal and violation and come out stronger on the other side. I got to reclaim my life and live it on my own terms. How would you act in this situation? Share your thoughts in the comments. On my 66th birthday, exactly 1 year after I woke up bald and humiliated, I threw myself a party. I invited my support group friends, my old friends I'd reconnected with, my lawyer Robert and his wife, and yes, Daniel and Oliver. It was a celebration not just of another year of life, but of survival, resilience, and the courage it takes to choose yourself when everyone expects you to sacrifice yourself. Daniel gave a speech that night that surprised me. He stood up in front of everyone and said, "A year ago, I failed my mother in the worst way possible. I enabled abuse, I dismissed her pain, and I chose my own comfort over her well-being. She would have been justified in cutting me out of her life completely. Instead, she's given me the chance to earn back her trust and to be a better father, a better son, and a better man. Mom, thank you for teaching me what real strength looks like. Thank you for showing me that love sometimes means setting boundaries. And thank you for not giving up on me, even when you had every reason to." I cried then, in front of everyone, but they were different tears than the ones I'd cried a year earlier. These were tears of release, of healing, of hope that maybe, just maybe, something good could grow from the ashes of what had been destroyed. Oliver, not understanding the weight of the moment, but sensing it was important, climbed into my lap and said, "Happy birthday, Grandma. I love you." And in that moment, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me, holding my grandson close, listening to my son try to articulate his growth and remorse, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. The woman who woke up bald and humiliated on her 65th birthday had been transformed into someone wiser, stronger, more authentically herself. The hair that was stolen from me had grown back differently, just as I had grown back differently from the violation I experienced. I was no longer the woman who would accept mistreatment to keep peace. I was no longer the woman who would doubt her own perceptions because others told her she was too sensitive.